officer is Justin Avery. He is the second photo on the top row there. Tim Bisbee over maintenance, myself, IT, finance, and of course operating. So those are the fields that we cover with our executive leadership team. This is a map of the Little Rock urbanized area as determined by the U.S. Census. Everywhere in green, as you can see, is in the Little Rock urbanized area. And that includes more than the city of Little Rock. It includes North Little Rock, Maumelle, Sherwood, Jacksonville, Cabot, Benton, Bryant, even Haskell, Shannon Hills, and even Wrightsville. So what this means is that if any of these cities want to start public transit and they want to draw down federal dollars in order to help them do so, they must work through Rock Region Metro, as we are the designated recipient of federal public transit funds for the Little Rock urbanized area. Conway is in a separate urbanized area because it surpassed 50,000 people a few years ago, and it's just far enough away physically from the population density of the Little Rock area to be in its own urbanized area as determined by the U.S. Census. So they get their own federal dollars for public transit. But if you're in the area in green, we're your designated public transit agency. And actually, we also handle Conway's microtransit service at their request. The history with our Sherwood is that for a long, long time, since the 80s, we had a route, an express route that Sherwood and Jacksonville paid into. It was the Route 36. It operated a couple times in the morning and a couple times in the late afternoon, and it was designed to get people from the suburbs to downtown Little Rock in the morning and back out from downtown Little Rock back to the suburbs at the end of the day. So it was not necessarily designed for the way that our suburbs here in Central Arkansas have grown over the decades. It wasn't, for example, designed to take people from downtown Little Rock to Sherwood in the morning or Jacksonville. It wasn't reverse. That would be what we call a reverse commute trip in transit. So it was never designed to do that. Over the years, it lost a lot of ridership. And toward the end of its life, it was not a highly used route at all. And so it was already part of a comprehensive operational analysis where we were considering cutting the routes that weren't high ridership routes, that weren't performing well because they were becoming too costly to operate. And then the pandemic hit. So that decision kind of got made for us by the pandemic on some level because we needed to have the resources that we had on hand, a limited number of buses and bus operators to provide service in higher ridership, higher demand areas. But through all that, we were talking with the city. We initially had an agreement in 2022 to launch microtransit service within the city of Sherwood using our one-time CARES Act funding that we received during the pandemic. So using a portion of that CARES Act funding to launch the service. There were some supply chain issues with vehicles. We've had a tight labor market that we've been working through, so that kind of got delayed. But earlier this year, we updated that agreement. We added a second vehicle to be in service for the city of Sherwood, which is, I think, roughly, it's 21 square miles, something like that. So we updated that agreement earlier this year to make that possible and add that second vehicle. And the second vehicle in this first year is going to be covered by Rock Region Metro. So the city of Sherwood is still only going to be paying for one vehicle in this first year, but we just thought it was really necessary to have a second vehicle, so we agreed to help fund that vehicle for this first year. The benefits of working with Sherwood on this project are that this microtransit service engages a somewhat familiar format. It is not the same, but it is similar in some respects to transit network companies like Uber or Lyft, in that it's an on-demand service. You can hail a ride through your smartphone. It's different in that it's geographically constricted and it's time constricted. So for example, if I wanted to go from Little Rock to Sherwood tonight at like 2 o'clock in the morning, and there was an Uber driver out there willing to drive me, and I was willing to pay whatever price they would charge me to do that, I could do that. So it's not the same as Uber. It's more like a version of Uber Pool. Has anyone in the room ever taken Uber Pool? Okay. Uber Pool is usually something that you only find in really big cities, and Uber Pool is when you share your ride with a stranger. So I'll give you an example of when I used it. I flew out to the Denver airport a couple years ago. Has anybody ever been to the Denver airport? Okay. So you know if you've gone to the Denver airport is actually outside of downtown Denver. It's more of like in a field, in a big, vast field. Yeah.
45 minutes from Denver, yeah.
Yeah, it feels like that long. I think it's only like 20, but it feels like forever.
Well, they say it's like the diameter of it's like so, like 6 miles, like some astronomical amount of land in Denver. So.
Right. So like if you want to go eat anywhere, there are some fast food restaurants that are kind of close to the airport. But if you wanted to go to downtown Denver or something to have a nice dinner or something, you would need to Uber in or find some kind of transportation in to downtown. So my husband and I were there, we called an Uber and we realized that we could get it much cheaper in the fare if we shared our ride with a stranger. So we did Uber Pool was one of the options. So when the car pulled up to pick us up, there was already somebody in the seat. It was like a big kind of roomy SUV. And that person was there, we got in, and we all went to downtown. And I can't even remember at this point who got dropped off first, but we were kind of all starting from the general same area, and we were going to the general same area, maybe a few streets over or something. So we were able to get a cheaper fare by doing that. So this is kind of similar to that. This isn't a private ride. It's not your personal taxi cab. It is a shared ride service that's on demand, and you can hail it through your phone. This partnership also uses our experience managing a highly robust and technical FTA regulation requirements. We've been doing this for a long time. We've been an agency since 1986. There's a lot of strings that come with federal dollars, including CARES Act funding, as far as reporting and things that you have to do, and we have a whole team of people that are very experienced in doing that. It also addresses the transportation needs of multiple resident groups. I was looking back over some, previous meetings that we've had out here, and people will say things like, well, no one's talked to me about needing this service. And I think that you guys are probably going to be a lot like Conway. When we went to Conway's a 3-college town. Conway had never had public transit before. And apparently there were a lot of people who were spending, I think, a lot of their days in their homes, housebound for the most part, unless they had a friend or a family member who could come and get them, maybe take them to the grocery store, things like that. Because all of a sudden, we launched, and this service just took off, and people were using it all over the place. And people, were like, where did all these folks come from? Like, what are they doing? I think that at the last meeting that we attended, your director of senior services was here. And I believe he said that you guys had about 20 to 25 rides that you provided in that program per week. I would not be surprised in the least if we start off in the first week and have that many rides at least per day, if not higher. Because I think what we're going to find is that there are a lot of people who haven't had the opportunity to get out of their homes and do things because they haven't had an affordable service that they can use for any reason. Doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be medically based. It could just be going to Starbucks to meet your friend for coffee. So I think you're going to find that there are more people than you think that are out there in your community that have an unmet demand and an unmet need for some basic transportation services, because that's certainly what we've discovered in Conway. So, and those resident groups include people who are senior citizens. It could be kids on the weekend who are not old enough to drive, or maybe they are, but they don't have a car that they have access to, and they need to get to, a soccer game or something like that. It could be a number of situations as far as who's going to be using the service and why. So a little bit about microtransit. We kind of talked about this for a minute, but it's a shared ride, point-to-point, accessible. So these are using accessible vehicles. So if you're somebody who uses a wheelchair or a walker, you're going to be able to use this service. It's not like you're going to have to worry about a 4-door sedan pulling up that can't accommodate the fact that you are using a mobility device. And it is a ride-hailing service using smaller transit vehicles. So these are not big vehicles. They're not big mass transit buses that you would see in Little Rock or North Little Rock. They're smaller vehicles. And so they can take several people at a time, but there is a limit to the party, which we will talk about here in a minute. And again, microtransit service is a technology-driven demand response service. So most people who use it will hail a ride through their smartphone. We do have a call-in option for people who do not have smartphones, so they are covered with this service as well. But it's a familiar interface. Like I said, if you've ever used Uber or Lyft, it's kind of a familiar interface. You can set a PIN to your location. You can type in an address. For example, if there's a common point like a Starbucks or a Walmart where you would have like several locations across an area, you can type in Starbucks and it'll start to fill in the information for you, sort of like doing a search on Google or a different browser like Bing. So it's a very familiar interface for people who have used those kind of services. It offers more coverage than a traditional mass transit bus system. So for example, to get a 35 or a 40-foot bus down some roads, you have to have roads of a certain width. You can't just go into tiny residential areas where there are cars tightly parked along both sides of the street and stuff like that. You can take these smaller vehicles places that a big mass transit bus can't go. So when you use microtransit in a community, you can penetrate a little bit further into the area as needed. I'll give you a great example of this. In Little Rock, we used to have a bus route that went to the edge of the port. If you've ever driven inside the Little Rock Port Authority, you know that the port was built on probably what was old county farmland before it became an industrial park in the port. And just like county farmland, there's just kind of roads that wind all the way back there for miles. It doesn't make any sense to send a big mass transit bus down to that area. However, there are a lot of employers out there, and they want to get their employees to their door. So a great way to do it is to use microtransit, and that's exactly what we've done in Little Rock. So that's one of our most popular microtransit zones because it's getting people right to the door of that Amazon Lit 1 building or the Wellspun building where they're making the big pipes. All that can be possible through microtransit because it can just go places and it makes more efficient sense to do so with a smaller vehicle rather than a 35 or 40-foot bus. Unlike Uber and Lyft and other similar services, it is a shared ride service. It's not you're taking a direct path right from point A to point B that's just for you. You're going to deviate out of your path a little bit because you're going to have somebody else who's riding maybe to the same general area but not the same place that you are. So they might get dropped off first. So you have to factor that in, that you're sharing a ride with somebody and it's somebody else may get dropped off before you, so you're not going to have a direct path from point A to point B. It also has a dedicated purpose-specific fleet. So if I do call an Uber tomorrow to get from point A to point B, and let's say I'm using a wheelchair, I'm not necessarily guaranteed that there's going to be any Uber driver out in my zone that actually has a wheelchair-accessible vehicle. This service does because it's a dedicated fleet for this service. So you're going to have 2 vehicles out in Sherwood for that reason. And it also has predictable fares. If I'm leaving like the Taylor Swift concert at the Simmons Bank Arena, which I wish Taylor would come here, that would be great. But if I'm leaving that concert at the same time everyone else is, and I'm trying to book an Uber, everyone who uses Uber knows that you're going to get what's called surge pricing, right? They're going to charge me top dollar because I want the car when everybody else wants the car. So they're going to charge me a pretty penny for doing that. Here, we have predictable fares. It's going to be the same fare every time, no surge pricing. So these are things that make this different and set it apart. Like I said, microtransit can support a variety of trip purposes, and this is public transit. This is not Medicaid-based transportation, for example. So you don't have to use this just to go to the doctor or the pharmacist only. You can go to the doctor, you can go to the pharmacist, you can go to the city park, you can go to the library, you can go meet your friends for coffee, you can go to the grocery store. These are all the ways that you can use this service, and it's not limited by the trip type. You can go to jobs. Eventually, and in other markets, this happens already, microtransit is used as sort of a park and ride service. So it's gathering up people from maybe smaller areas, maybe where there's a lower demand for transit, and it's dropping them off at a common point along a commuter line sort of like the Chicago L, for example. You know, like if you can think about that, if you've ever been there and you've started out from the suburbs, you know that like people can round up and drive even their own personal cars to a park and ride lot and then go and get on the L and then ride the subway all the way into the downtown core, which a lot of people want to do because it costs a lot of money to park downtown in Chicago. So this can be used on a smaller scale for suburban areas just like this one, eventually to hook back up to the main spine of our system and make it a truly regional system. It also is used in a lot of other markets as what is known as gap service. So you can use it on the weekends when maybe you can't afford as a municipality to operate a bunch of 35 or 40-foot mass transit buses, or really late at night if people are working the night shift. And you've got in other communities what's known as the late night service. That's sometimes from like midnight to 4 a.m. So that could be something that we eventually do in this market as well. But that's how it's used in other places. It's also used to gauge demand for transit service in general. Unlike the fixed route buses, we're not following you personally when you get on like a bus in downtown Little Rock, like a big mass transit bus, and you go somewhere else. No one's tracking you. But through microtransit, because it's a technology-driven service, we already have data for your origin and destination trips. That's part of the service. So we have a lot better data on how people are using the service. So we know how many people, for example, are starting out from an address and ending up and share a common destination as going to Walmart, for example, for one day. How many people are starting out at a certain apartment complex on their trips every day. And so we get to know what the hot spots are in the zone, so we can tell where it makes sense in the future. If you do want to have a big bus service, what would be the best corridor for that? Because we can see where all the trips are. We can see where they're starting and we can see where they're ending. So that's a lot better intel than we've ever had in transit, because it's a tech-driven industry and it's a tech-driven service. So people can use it to gauge demand. So we might put out these vehicles, and it could be just like I'm thinking it might be, where you have this latent group of people who is, they're not able to travel necessarily right now because there's no option available to them. But what we might find is that there's a hidden market that all of a sudden emerges of people with pent-up demand for basic transportation service. It sounds like from just some previous conversations I had right before this meeting started that there's definitely that sense in the senior citizen communities that you have here in Sherwood, for example. So it's a great way to gauge what the demand is. Is it non-existent or does it exist? And if it exists, who is it? And we'll be able to figure a lot of that out just by using the data that we get for this program. And if there's ever a consideration, for example, to build a commuter route back in the future, instead of being a version of the express route, which wasn't necessarily what I would call a commuter route, but if there is interest in building a true commuter route in the future, like a fixed big bus route, it's possible that we can gauge what the demand might be for that through using this data first to see, okay, out of all the microtransit riders that we have, who is actually interested in getting dropped off at a common pickup point along a route that makes sense? That would be a more direct, quick path to downtown Little Rock, for example. Is that a possibility? Is that something that people here want? You'll be able to figure that out with the data. This map, and it's kind of hard to see from the back, but basically it's just showing the different types of structures, starting with the kind of yellow image on the left. That's basically showing a suburban type atmosphere, a natural zone with a rural zone right to its right, a suburban zone, three images over from the left there, and then general urban zone after that, urban center zone, urban core, and special district. And what this is really saying is that there's a different type of public transit service out there to meet each market's unique needs. If you're starting on the far right of that map, that's like being in downtown New York City or something. So what it's saying is that commuter type public transit service, shared mobility like this microtransit service, fixed route regular mass transit bus service, frequent service, and then high capacity service like a subway system makes the most sense in a very densely packed area like downtown New York City. But you guys are really, I would say Sherwood probably matches the two images that are second and third from the left there, where parts of Sherwood seem almost rural to me in some of the district areas that I've seen, and then some are more suburban. But what makes the most sense out of all the options that you have for public transit for such two areas of those kind of densities, rural and suburban, would be commuter service, which we don't have yet. That would be more of like, the bus that I described coming to a shared pickup point and then heading on down to maybe the downtown core. But shared mobility is also another option, which is what microtransit service is. So you can, again, it makes a lot more sense to use smaller vehicles to get deeper into residential streets and smaller streets using that service. And we're looking at things like density, demographics, land use, and travel patterns to establish that. Just a quick recap of kind of like what you look at when you're looking for, does this area need transit service or what's the demand for it? There's a composite score that you can put together looking at things like zero vehicle households, people with disabilities, people with low-income households, young adults who are too young to drive, senior citizens who maybe don't want to drive, maybe they have trouble driving at night, maybe they don't have access to a car again, maybe they've lost some of their mobility. So those are some of the key core groups to transit support anywhere in the country. And so those are some of the things we look at. When you look at this map of Sherwood, this is just showing you, I don't know if you could see it from that far back in the room, but there's like a red dotted line that represents the city boundary. And then you can see that the core areas that score the highest as far as all these groups are in yellow and orange as far as the transit composite score of people with zero vehicle households, senior citizens, younger people from lower household incomes. And the red areas are actually right across your city boundary in the city of North Little Rock. So you can see that toward the southern end of the map of the zone, if you will, which roughly mirrors the city boundaries, those are the areas that we predict will have more transit demand because they're already cited by looking at all the factors that we look like in the world of transit to see who would be most likely to use the service. This next slide is looking at just population density. So again, in the northern area of your city, it's a little more rural in some areas when you're driving by and actually looking at the landscape around you. And you can kind of tell that from this map. And then the areas in yellow are denser with population density and employment density. And even the printed map that I have there to your right, you can see again, if you see a little black mark on there, and when you get closer, you'll see that those are different kinds of icons associated with them. But my point is they represent places that are trip generators, what we call trip generators in the business. It's places where people want to go. Clinics, public library, court building, police department, city hall, places like that. And you can see that they are mainly on the southern portion of that map and not the northern. So that's basically saying the same thing here. It's a density of things, whether that's people, jobs, or actual places that you want to go. This is a map of just showing where the density is as far as multifamily housing, which if you're living in an apartment complex or a senior center, something like that, those are going to be areas where people are more likely to use transit if it's available. Medical facilities, educational, major retail, community and civic centers, like the place where we're standing right now, major employers. Again, they're all kind of toward the southern area of the map. And then traffic pattern flows. This is actually some information that we got from MetroPlan, which is the long-range transportation planning organization for a 4-county area, including Pulaski. And what we found is that the most significant travel flow in Sherwood is within the city. So it makes sense that we would have a microtransit service that serves the city, because you can go to the places where people are traveling within the city. So it could be just going from your home to the grocery store, or going from your, home to the library or whatnot. But most of those travel patterns are there. We do want to recognize that McCain Mall and that whole area is very popular as well with the city of Sherwood. But I just want to, you can see in all these yellow lines that are all crisscrossing the city that most of the traffic flow is actually within the city, which makes great sense to have microtransit there to support that. Okay, from the Sherwood service design, from the rider's perspective, the key design features of microtransit service are the following. You have an app. It's easy to book point A to point B within the app. You'll get real-time vehicle information. It'll tell you how many minutes away your driver is. So that's always key to know as well. Reasonable wait and travel times and affordable fares, which we'll talk about here in a minute. You can book through the app, and I always encourage people to learn how to do that. So again, I said at the beginning of this meeting, I'm happy to meet with everybody right after and show you individually on your phone how to download that app and what it looks like. It will not have Sherwood zone within it until the day that we launch. So it's not going to have Sherwood right now. It'll tell you that you're out of the zone if you pull it up right now, but you can at least download it and have it downloaded to your phone, set up your account, and get familiar with how it looks. If you don't have a smartphone, we do have a call-in option. The wait and travel times are a function of the vehicles that we have in service and how and the service zone and how big it is. So you see the map there in the room. We saw, and I have another slide of the map of the zone here in a minute. But basically, it is roughly the size of the city boundaries. That's a pretty big geographic area. That's roughly, I think, 21 square miles. We've got 2 vehicles in service. So if we find that the demand goes up, there are ways to address that in the future. But that absolutely affects the wait and travel time for your ride, the size of the zone, and how many vehicles that you have in service. We budgeted 2 vehicles, as I said, for Sherwood Microtransit. The first year for that second vehicle will be funded solely by Metro, and that's going to be 12 hours of service a day, Monday through Saturday. So it's going to be 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. This is that map again, and as I was saying earlier, for anybody who's watching this later, you can see that most of those trip generators, again, which are things like the senior center and retail, shopping, grocery stores, they're mainly located toward the southern part of the zone. So we have run a simulation with our software provider for this service, which is called VIA. They're the global leader for microtransit service. And they have estimated, using their simulation, that we can get up to 75 requests per day for trips. And again, your senior director said that he got 20 to 25 trips in a week. So we can get up to 75 ride requests in a day and keep the average wait time under 30 minutes and the average travel time under 20 minutes. So total wait and travel time would be under 50 minutes in that scenario. If we exceed 75 ride requests per day, we're going to be what's known as above capacity that we've planned for. And that may happen. And if it does happen, we in transit choose to think of this optimistically and as a good problem to have, because it means that the demand is there and people actually want to use the service. So there are ways to handle that demand as well. The most popular way is to do a fleet expansion, to add more vehicles. That's always the most popular. The less popular ways to handle that are to engage in something like distance-based pricing. So for example, maybe the first 5 miles, it's going to be this amount of fare. But if your trip exceeds that, it goes up. That's less popular, as you guys can imagine, because it means more money for your trip. But these are ways to handle the demand. Another way to handle the demand that's not popular is to shrink the zone. So just going back to this map, If it got to be that we had overcapacity kind of situation right off the bat, you could actually shrink the zone. And it would, there are definitely recommendations that we've had during planning this service from professional transit planners who are pointing out that there's not as many trip generators toward the north part of this zone. Of course, we understand that when you're rolling out a service across the city, you want to try to get the whole city. Everybody understands that from an equity standpoint, fairness in general. But in reality, if we do exceed capacity, that is a way to manage the demand. It's not popular, but it is a way to manage the demand. Again, the popular notion is to add more vehicles, but to do that requires more funding. So I want everybody to keep that in mind, because this is something that the city of Sherwood's doing, and it's great that they're kind of using this project to see if there's any demand. But it will be a new budget line for the city of Sherwood in many respects. I mean, yes, they had a budget line before for the old Route 36, but this is a different type of service, and it's a new budget line. And if it's going to increase in popularity and they're going to add vehicles, then they're going to need to fund that. And that's competing with things like that are also highly regarded in Sherwood, like your police service, your fire service, streets infrastructure, flooding, all kinds of things that your city pays for, city parks. So this is just another expense that comes into play with that. So I want everyone to keep that in mind, that it's not always easy sometimes to immediately meet demand, because it means that you have to be able to roll out more funding for it. And that's part of launching this service, is to see what the actual demand in Sherwood is. And on some level, you can try to predict it, but you don't really know until you just start it up and see. Like I said, if it's anything like Conway, there could be a lot of people who are interested in it that you haven't even heard from yet. The service vehicles, this is what they look like. They're Ford Transits. This is a photo of one of them. It's actually a Transit in another market, but it is going to be lime green, blue, and white, just like this one. They're accessible vehicles again. They have a side wheelchair lift, so anyone who's using a wheelchair or like a rolling walker, where they need a little more assistance to get on the vehicle, they'll be able to use that wheelchair lift to get into the vehicle. It can accommodate up to 6 passengers, and it's, again, it is owned, maintained, fueled, and insured by Rock Region Metro. The fare structure, it's going to be $2 per person per trip. So $2 per person per trip, meaning if I'm riding with my husband, it's a $4 fare total, because it's $2 per person per trip. So we're both riding, $2 for me, $2 for him, $4, one way. So if we return and do a trip, and we maybe go to a store and get some shopping done, and then we want to book a return trip, that's going to be another $4 for us to return. So $2 per person per trip. The ways you can pay it in Sherwood will be through Exact Cash, or you can pay through a different app we have called Token Transit. Token Transit is, you can download the app from our website. I'm also happy to show everyone how to download that right after this meeting. It's easy to use, it's secure, all of your information's encrypted in it. So it's just like using any other app that you would use to pay for anything. And so that is, this is a fare that is actually lower than microtransit service in similar markets. We did a fare study for microtransit a couple of years ago and looked at similar markets, and $2 is the lowest one out of all of them. So it keeps it affordable for people, helps pay for the service, and it helps to manage the demand. The lower the fares, the higher the demand is. Again, I was saying earlier that one way to manage demand is to do, for example, distance-based pricing, where you start charging more beyond for trips that are longer than 5 miles. But another way to do it is just to charge more, period, for everybody's rides. So as you increase fares, you lower ridership, because the more expensive it is to pay per trip, the more people start thinking, do I really need to take this trip today? Or should I go to this shopping center over here where the bank is right next door and I can go shopping and walk over to the bank, then come back and then get a ride back home, instead of taking multiple separate trips to do all that. So this is the start of the logic that happens when you're trying to figure out how you pay for these trips and what you're willing to do and what you're not. So pricing factors into that. And we'll be monitoring, assessing, the fares as needed at appropriate times. So, you can't always have $2 per person per trip forever. For example, things do change. And we have not had a fare price change at Rock Region since 2009. So the cost of everything goes up, it seems like, every year. So we'll be keeping an eye on how the fares factor into demand and be advising the city council and the mayor on that as we go along. But the Little Rock and North Little Rock multi-day and multi-ride passes do not apply to Metro Connect Sherwood. This is a separate service. So for example, you'll see on our website that there's like a 10-ride pass and a 31-day pass. That's for Little Rock and North Little Rock zones and bus service, not for Sherwood service. This is the way that we pay for the service out here, is to charge per trip. And that's what keeps it affordable. So we'll be launching this service here in 2 weeks. Is today the 10th? Today is the 10th. So less than 2 weeks, on Monday, September the 23rd. It was dependent on recruitment, hiring, and training drivers and vehicle procurement. Again, we had some supply chain issues in the transit world after the pandemic. They're easing up, but they're still there, but they're nothing like they were, thank goodness, before. So we finally emerged from that. We are having our public outreach meetings today and tomorrow evening to discuss how the service works, how to use it. And we are happy to set up any subsequent rider app training sessions. So I'll be following up with Heather and others in the mayor's office to see if some of the predominant senior centers around here, like the housing complexes, and also the actual senior center staff, wants to organize a day where I come out to maybe an existing meeting that's already on the docket that we know is going to be well attended, and I'll be happy to set up a table and help people set up the app on their phone, learn how to use it. It's very simple to use, and it's totally fine and common for people to have a little, some people just need a little extra push or know how to do that. That's why we're here. So we can set up as many of those as we need to get this off the ground and to make sure that everybody feels comfortable using the app. And the app is a really great way to do this. It just is better, I think, always if you have the power within your own hand to book your ride, make your ride request or see where your vehicle is and all that stuff. So because we're not launching until Monday, September the 23rd, you are not going to see this zone on our website where you would see the other zones right now. You will see it there after service ends on Sunday, September 22nd. I'll be the person loading up all that stuff, so you'll be able to see it on the webpage later that evening. So that will all be happening after service ends on Sunday, September 22nd, and before it starts on Monday the 23rd. And then you'll be able to see all of that. Right now, if you want to see something on the website about the Sherwood Zone, you can, but it's in a different area of our website, which I'm happy to pull up. I may have to have Trey come up here in a minute to help me pull that up on this computer, because this one's not my computer, but I can pull that up in the browser and show you where to find it. But it's under rider information, and there's a page called annual service enhancements, and you can find all the information about it right there for now. And I'll be updating the information on that page after tomorrow evening's public information meeting as well, with some more information that I'm sharing today in these meetings. So after the launch, at some point, probably 6 months to a year out, we will do a rider survey to see how things are going with the service here in Sherwood, what people think of it, any feedback that they have, and that will kind of mirror some of our other customer service surveys that we've done. So it'll touch on an array of issues, your operators, their friendliness, the cleanliness of the vehicles, things like that. Whether you like the span of service, whether Monday through Saturday, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. works for you, all of that. And again, I'm not making any promises about changing things like the service and whatnot, because that does take funding. But we do want to know what people are using it for example. We'll ask things like that in the survey, like, hey, are you using it mainly for work or for going to the grocery store, or what are you using this service for? So we will be taking surveys like that. We'll be monitoring the performance, how many trips, how many passenger trips. We'll be providing all that information on a monthly basis to the city council, to the mayor. And so they will have all that information, how much CARES Act funding is being put toward it every month. There'll be a full accounting and report every month to the city council for ridership and finances. And that concludes the formal part of the presentation. As I was telling Heather, I upgraded my phone, and I did have an adapter where I could show you exactly here on the screen what the app looks like. But unfortunately, I didn't realize that I had a different type of input on my new phone. So I don't have that ability, but I'm happy to show everyone after the Q&A how to do that.
Do you still have your adapter?
I do.
I mean, because you could use my phone if that would be helpful to you.
Sure, absolutely. Well, and Trey's not here, so I don't know how.
Heather knows a lot about how to work that.
If you know how to disassemble the HDMI from this to plug it into that with the My adapter, we can do that. But if not, no worries, because it's a small crowd
It's just
right now. Okay,
Just the HDMI.
Okay.
So-
let me get that. And you have the app on your phone.
Oh, well, I don't know.
Okay, just download it really. The app's called Metro Connect, Rock Region. And again, it is not going to be showing Sherwood on there today because Sherwood has not launched yet. But it's called Metro Connect Rock Region. And so we'll test it out here with Heather's
Oh, wait, this one.
Metro Connect.
Yes. got it.
There's a couple of different Metro, yeah.
Weird thing that popped up right at first.
So-
So, yeah, because this is old school here.
Okay.
And then,
Okay.
and however. just-
Where's that HDMI?
Oh,
Okay. All right. Good deal. All right. I'll we'll not get into your browser.
whatever you need to do, honestly.
Wait, this is not HDMI. This is something else.
Oh, it said
It's gotta
HDMI
be-
on
It has to be notched in two different places,
That's
like this.
connected.
So
Mhm.
while we're looking for that, does anyone have any immediate questions? Yes.
If you got an appointment at 9 o'clock at the doctor's office, how early should you call to make that appointment run?
That's a good question. So this is purely on demand. So for example, I cannot make a ride request and say, I'd like for you to be at my house at 8:30. That's not how it works. What happens is the app will use an algorithm that's powered by the software system, by the VIA team, to put together information based on your location, and where you are in space, and where the vehicles are in space, and how many ride requests have come before you, and where all those ride requests are going. And it will create on the fly, with using the algorithm and all that information, the best trip it can offer you at the time. If it can't find a ride for you in the next 45 immediate minutes, it will tell you that we're over demand and that you'll have to try back and try to rebook the ride and wait like 15 minutes to do so. Again, we are built with the 2 vehicles and capacity using VIA system to have 75 ride requests per day. So it remains to be seen if it goes from 20 to 25 weekly senior citizens trips only, as it is right now using your senior citizen services, to 75 ride requests per day. I think it might take some time to get there. Hopefully it does. Hopefully we're not over capacity from the get-go. But to briefly answer your question, I would, if it were me, I would start trying to book my ride at 8 o'clock. And if it doesn't have a ride in the next 45 minutes, I'm making a plan B maybe. And then if it does, then I've got, the ride request pickup, and the whole trip shouldn't take you less than 50 minutes total wait and travel time. So you've kind of buffered it a little bit. And I always tell people, bring a book just in case, because this is the world of transit wherever you are. I could be standing on the New York platform waiting for the subway and have a 10-minute wait, so I've got something to do. I'm reading the news or whatever. But that's what I would do. And you got to get a sense for the feel of your zone. So for example, in downtown Little Rock, we had the East Little Rock Riverdale zone. It's the biggest zone that we have in Little Rock, and it's really busy. It serves the port.
We could get it for tomorrow.
Okay. Okay, no worries. No worries. It serves the port, and it serves the airport, and it serves UPS, and it serves like a bunch of different places downtown. And so it's a very popular zone, but even if it's a popular zone, it's relatively easy to get from point A to point B because it's not very spread out. And so it does pretty well. And so there's not really ever a long wait time usually in that zone for anything. And so I think you need to try to do some what I call lower stakes rides first, just to get a feel for it. Like, so for example, go on, a weekday or a Saturday to the grocery store and see about how long that trip takes you, and maybe try to go to a place that's near your doctor's office, but it's not your doctor's office, and it's not like your day when you have to be there at 9, and see how long that takes at that time of day. I would also advise anyone who has, for example, if you're retired and you don't have to travel during what is considered peak traffic time, like 8 o'clock in the morning when everybody's trying to get to work and school, I would advise you to try to schedule appointments for midday, like maybe 10:30, maybe 2:30, 3, when less people are in general traveling. Because the same rules that try to apply to car traffic apply to transit traffic and usage. There are peak times and there are off-peak times. So I would start off with an 8 o'clock.
Is your doctor in Sherwood?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's within Sherwood. It's from point to point within the zone, and the zone is pretty much mirroring the city boundaries, more or less.
Is there a tipping policy?
That's a great question. And I have Emmeline here with me. She works for Rock Region Metro too, and she's taking notes so we can help better inform future meetings. I've never actually been asked that question before, so this is exactly why she's here, is to take questions like that so we are better prepared for the future. These are public transit employees who are already paid wage, so no, there is no expectation for a tip, and $2 per person per pair. $2 per person per trip is the fare, and that's what it needs to remain. So no one needs to feel obligated to tip. There are a million stories out there in America right now about how, and I know people have different viewpoints on it, but no tip needed. But that doesn't preclude you from giving them a kind word. If you thought that they provided, a good service to you, I would encourage you, actually, if you think that they gave you good service, to point that out, because everybody in public service deserves some accolades every now and then for getting out there and doing the challenging work of providing public service. So,
Are you going to be at the meeting tonight?
tomorrow night, yes.
Tomorrow night?
Yes.
Because with my phone, I'm awkward and don't know what to do, so I'd like to bring it for you to get those apps in for me.
I can absolutely help you with that. And I will say to anybody out there who may be watching this later, or anyone in the room, definitely link up your account with the email address that you access from your smartphone. Some people have multiple email addresses, and some of them aren't actually on an app on their phone, but you'll want to tie it to whatever email address you look at from your phone. Are there any other questions? Yeah? No? Good? Oh.
You've done a wonderful job of explaining it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. I think it's going to be a very popular service. And like I said, I'm happy to stay after this and help anybody individually look at the app, download it. I can show you how to book a ride, and we can just cancel it really quickly. just so you get a feel for how to do it. When you book the ride, there's like a little bar. It's kind of like a lot of different apps where it'll kind of have a timing bar that kind of fills up with color, and it takes 30 minutes to go all the way, and it's giving you a ride proposal. It's saying, okay, I want to go from my house to the doctor's office, and it'll say, okay, we can pick you up in the next 15 to 20 minutes, let's say. And so it's asking you do you want to book this? Is that good for you? Do you want to book this? And so it's up to you to say, confirm ride, and hit the button. And you've got 30 seconds to decide if that's good for you or not. And if that bar runs out, you don't have to panic. You can just submit your ride request again, and it'll give you a new ride proposal. But basically, it's very user-friendly. I think it's very easy to see what's going on there. The most trouble comes from the fact that all technology like this uses an underlying map system. This is no different. It uses Google. And sometimes, every once in a while, Google fails. I know no one thinks this is a reality, but let me give you an example. The McDonald's on Broadway in Little Rock changed at some point over the last couple of years, and it moved. It was where the Chick-fil-A is now, I think, and it was on the east side of the Broadway. It moved over to the west side of Broadway. The east side of Broadway in Little Rock is in our East Little Rock Riverdale zone. The west side is not. And so somebody put in McDonald's Broadway, and it has that ability, kind of like a Google search, to just type in the name of it and hit, yeah, that's where I want to get picked up. But the problem is that Google hadn't updated the actual address from the east side of the street to the west. And so it was causing some problems. So every now and then you'll get a tech glitch like that. And when you do, that's exactly why we have a customer service number. So you can call us, or you can email us at info@rrmetro.org, or call the main number, which is 501-375-6717. You can, and we'll have brochures that have these, all these details on it as well for Sherwood, that we're working on right now. So you can call that number and let us know, and then we'll do what we can with the VIA team to make them aware of it for the software, but we'll also take it a step further and put in a note to Google. Now, when I put a note into Google, it's just like when you guys put in a note to Google. Who knows where it goes? Who knows who's going to address it and when? But hopefully it'll get fixed. And so we had to do that for that example that I'm giving you with McDonald's, because that was a pretty major change. But it was surprising to me because it had not been fixed on that map for 2 years at that point, because the McDonald's had moved a while back. I mean, Chick-fil-A's up and running. It's been there for a while. So occasionally you'll have a tech glitch like that. Or if you're very near the edge of the zone, one thing that we've discovered is that if you're right on the border, it really matters. You have to be very precise, and if you're going to set the pin, there's like, it's like setting a pin in Uber or Lyft, and you just kind of move your hand and your finger around on the map and precisely place it. If it's not that precise, it might get confused and think you're out of the zone. So if you're living on a house that's right on the edge of the city boundary, and you're trying to book a ride, I would just caution you that that might be the error. So we learn as we're going through this process, and we just transitioned away from our former software provider for this service to VIA like a year ago, and it hasn't even been a full year. So we're still learning little quirks like that, but the longer we go with it, the more well-informed we are about it. And I try to add that kind of stuff to our Metro Connect landing page, so anybody who's truly digging into the weeds with the tech can understand kind of what some of the issues are. And we have a regular meeting with our team, so where we can cover anything that's come up that we think is problematic as far as the tech. But tech's always changing. Unfortunately, it's like everything. It's like whenever you open your favorite Google service or any kind of app that you have on your phone, sometimes the whole look will have changed overnight, and that's kind of part of it, So we try to keep on top of that with the team as much as we can, but that's just kind of the nature of tech. Yeah.
I think it would be nice if you made yourself available to the Senior Citizen Center.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that maybe for the next luncheon, maybe we could have you come, we'll give you the date of that, and then that, because that's when the majority of the seniors are there, and I'll get with them about that and get with you and see what your availability is, so,
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd love to come out to the Senior Citizen Center, and
They'll feed you too,
they'll feed me. Oh, excellent, excellent. I love that. I'm here for it. I like to eat.
yeah, but I completely agree with that. That'd be a great way to capture the majority of our seniors, so.
Okay, perfect. Perfect, yeah, we'll definitely sign up for that and, you know, just stay and help people with their phones. I mean, that's very common. And no one needs to feel any sort of way about it or embarrassed. I mean, that is just totally normal, and sometimes tech can be tricky, so we're happy to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and call this meeting concluded, but again, I'll stay and be packing up, so if anybody wants to come talk to me about an individual question, I'm here. Thank you. Thank you. All right.
I didn't get your name.
It's Becca Green. Becca, short for Rebecca. Becca Green, and green's just like the color. Mm-hmm.